In the year 1571, the world stood on the edge of change. The mighty Ottoman Empire had risen like a tidal wave, stretching from the gates of Vienna to the deserts of Arabia. For centuries, their armies had marched without end. Their ships had ruled the seas, and their crescent banners had cast long shadows across Europe. To many, the Ottomans seemed unstoppable. Their victories too many to count, their ambition without limit. They had conquered Constantinople, broken the once great Byzantine Empire, and turned the Mediterranean into their highway of conquest. Across Europe, whispers grew louder that Christendom itself might soon be consumed. The fear was real, the threat unmistakable. But even in that dark time, hope still flickered. The Christian world, though divided by politics and pride, realized that if it did not unite, it would surely perish. The stage was set for one of the greatest battles in human history, not just of weapons, but of faith, courage, and destiny. When the island of Cyprus fell to the Ottomans, Europe finally awoke. It was the spark that lit the fire. The Republic of Venice, whose trade routes depended on the eastern seas, could no longer ignore the danger. The Pope in Rome, Pius V, saw the invasion not merely as a loss of territory, but as an assault on the very soul of Christendom. He called for unity, for a holy alliance to stop the empire's advance. Against all odds, he succeeded. Spain, Venice, and the Papal States agreed to fight together under one banner, forming what became known as the Holy League. It was not an easy alliance. These powers had long distrusted each other. Their rivalries ran deep, and their interests often clashed. But desperation can unite even old enemies, and the threat of Ottoman domination forced them to look beyond pride and politics. At the head of this coalition stood a young commander, Don John of Austria, the half-brother of King Philip II of Spain. He was only 24 years old, but his courage and charisma inspired men far older than himself. He was a symbol of faith in a world that seemed lost, and his mission was clear: stop the Ottoman Empire or die trying. Preparations began in the port of Messina, Sicily. Over 200 ships gathered there, filling the harbor with masts and sails that blotted out the sky. It was the largest Christian fleet assembled in generations. Soldiers, sailors, and volunteers came from all corners of Europe: Spaniards, Venetians, Genoese, and the brave Knights of Malta.
Please do well to like and subscribe to this channel if you haven't, as an encouragement for more of this kind of content.
Priests walked among them, blessing the ships, hearing confessions, and leading prayers before battle. It was a moment of unity that few thought possible. Yet across the sea, another force was moving. The Ottoman fleet, under the command of Ali Pasha, sailed from Constantinople with over 30,000 men. Their ships were sleek and fast, their rowers disciplined, and their commanders experienced from decades of war. To the Ottomans, the Mediterranean was already theirs, and this Christian resistance was but a small storm in an endless sea. Confidence ran high in the Ottoman ranks. Their empire had never lost a major naval battle. But even as their sails caught the wind, fate was already writing a different ending. On the morning of October 7th, 1571, the sea was still, the wind had died, and a strange calm settled over the Gulf of Patras near the town of Lepanto. The water shone like glass, reflecting the fleets that faced one another, two worlds staring across a silent sea. The Christian fleet formed a massive cross, stretching from horizon to horizon. The Ottoman fleet curved like a crescent moon, the symbol of their faith and empire. For a moment, there was peace, the last the sea would know that day. Then, as if by signal, the cannons roared. Smoke filled the air, and the sound of war shattered the morning calm. Ships surged forward, oars cutting the water, and the sea became a storm of splintered wood, iron, and flame. Men shouted prayers and battle cries as the two great armadas collided. The battle that followed was chaos made real. Galleys crashed into one another, soldiers leapt across decks, and cannonballs tore through ships like thunder. The smell of gunpowder, blood, and salt filled the air. The water turned dark with oil and ash. In the midst of it all, priests raised crucifixes over the wounded, shouting blessings through the noise. The Christian soldiers fought with desperate faith, while the Ottoman warriors fought with unshakable courage. It was not just a clash of armies, it was a collision of civilizations. In the center of the battle, Don John's flagship, the Real, rammed straight into Ali Pasha's ship, the Sultana. The two great vessels locked together, their decks exploding in gunfire and screams. For hours they fought, neither side giving an inch. Muskets flared, swords flashed, and men fell by the hundreds. But then, in the heat of the struggle, Don John's men broke through. Ali Pasha was struck down, and his great banner, the symbol of the Ottoman fleet, was pulled down. When that banner fell, something inside the Ottoman ranks broke. Confusion spread, signals were lost, morale wavered, and panic began to take hold. The Holy League pressed forward, their ships cutting through the weakened Ottoman line. Venetian galleys rammed enemy ships. Spanish soldiers boarded and captured them. The sea that had been the pride of the Ottoman Empire was now filled with smoke, flame, and wreckage. The battle raged for hours, but by sunset, it was over. The Christian fleet stood victorious. More than 30,000 Ottoman soldiers were dead or captured, and nearly 200 of their ships had been destroyed or seized. It was the greatest naval defeat the Ottomans had ever suffered, and it marked the first time in over a century that Christian Europe had pushed back the Empire of the Crescent. As night fell, the survivors looked across a sea that no longer sparkled blue, but red with blood and burning oil. Don John stood upon his ship, exhausted but silent, staring at the horizon. Around him, his men sang hymns of thanksgiving, their voices trembling with both triumph and grief. The priests prayed for the souls of the dead, friend and foe alike. The sea, once a symbol of Ottoman dominance, had become a graveyard of empires. The Battle of Lepanto had ended, but its meaning was only beginning to take shape. Though the Ottomans remained powerful after Lepanto, they never again dominated the Mediterranean. Their aura of invincibility was broken. The victory proved that courage and unity could defy even the greatest of odds. For the Christian world, it was not only a military triumph, but a spiritual awakening, a reminder that faith could move men to extraordinary acts of bravery. Yet the battle also left scars. Tens of thousands lay dead, and the sea itself seemed to mourn. It was not a victory of conquest, but of survival. A stand that said, "Here is where we stop, no further." The lesson of Lepanto endures through time. It tells us that even when the world seems lost, courage and unity can rise from despair. It reminds us that strength is not found in numbers alone, but in conviction, in the will to fight for something greater than oneself. The men of Lepanto fought not for riches or land, but for the survival of their faith, their people, and their world. The winds of history shifted that day, and the Mediterranean, once ruled by fear, was reclaimed by hope. The Battle of Lepanto was not just a victory of ships and steel, it was a victory of spirit, proving that even the darkest tides can be turned by those who refuse to surrender. The year 1571 would be remembered as the day the Mediterranean changed forever.